Dragon Age Veilguard's writing is terrible. Salam, my name is Mustafa. I am a professional game developer. I am the founder and solo developer of Sabar Path. In the past, I worked at Treyarch during the development of Black Ops 4. Right now, I self-develop and publish small games on Steam, such as Nexus Defenders, which is a narrative-driven tower defense game, as well as Beware Tomorrow, which is a first-person stealth horror game, coming soon on Steam. In this video, I'm going to compare Tosh from Dragon Age Veilguard with Grunt from Mass Effect 2. Both Tosh and Grunt are outsider characters dealing with identity and belonging. What's the difference? Grunt's arc is engaging, earned, and tied into the game's themes, while Tosh's feels forced, self-inflicted, and disconnected from the world around her. We're going to compare Tosh and Grunt in relatability, conflict execution, world building, character likability, and resolution. Tosh's struggle is too hyper-specific to connect with most players. The biggest issue with Tosh's arc is that her struggle is far too niche. Her entire story revolves around her frustration with people recognizing her gender identity, something that applies to a tiny fraction of the population. A specific struggle is not inherently bad, but good character writing takes specific struggles and makes them feel universal. Tosh's story doesn't do that. It doesn't tie into any broader themes like self-acceptance, overcoming adversity, or proving one's worth. Those things resonate with a wider audience. Instead, the focus is entirely on getting others to use the right pronouns. Her arc is resolved after her mother gets kidnapped and she finally refers to Tosh as they right before Tosh's mother dies. This doesn't create emotional investment for most players. If her arc had been framed around being an outsider trying to find her place, rather than fixated on how others perceive her, it could have been far more engaging. The best outsider story arcs work because they tap into universal themes, not just identity labels. Her conflict is entirely centered on how others treat her rather than her personal growth. Because it lacks a deeper emotional core, it fails to engage players other than those who share the exact same experience of trying to get others to accept that they are non-binary. Grunt's struggle feels unique, but the themes are universal. Grunt's backstory is also hyper-specific. He's a Krogan grown in a lab without a traditional upbringing. But the key difference is that Mass Effect doesn't focus on the sci-fi logistics of his birth. His struggle isn't the fact that he was grown in a tank. Instead, his arc is framed around a struggle that most people can relate to: rejection and the need to prove oneself. He isn't just upset that others don't see him as a true Krogan. He actively works to earn that respect. His story taps into universal emotions of wanting to belong, proving your worth, and facing rejection, making it far more engaging to a general audience. His story isn't about people acknowledging what he is, it's about proving himself through action. Even if players don't relate to being a tank-bred super soldier, they can relate to the struggle of feeling like an outsider. Mass Effect ensures his arc is about emotional growth, not just his origins, which makes it more compelling. The second point, conflict execution. A well-written outsider arc usually involves real external challenges, whether that means proving oneself, facing rejection, or evolving as a person. Tosh, however, doesn't go through any of that. Her struggle isn't about fighting for a place in the world. It's about expecting validation from others, despite already being supported. Her competence is never questioned. From the moment she's introduced, her mother and teammates believe in her abilities and never doubt that she's capable. She faces against someone who's nearly twice her size and she just burns him to a crisp. No one treats her as an outcast, and she is never forced to prove her worth to the team. Her struggle is entirely personal, but it's framed as if it's an external conflict. Since no one is actually trying to hold her back, her frustration feels self-imposed rather than an earned frustration. This makes her arc less compelling because she never has to fight for anything. If her story had been about earning acceptance through action, like proving herself in battle, leading a mission, or overcoming internal doubt, it would have felt stronger. Instead, she spends most of the game upset about how others perceive her, rather than doing anything to grow or change. Grunt's story is the exact opposite. His struggle isn't about what others think of him, It's about proving himself worthy. His rite of passage mission forces him to fight for his place in Krogan society, giving players an interactive role in his growth. He faces real external resistance. The Krogan don't immediately accept him. He has to prove himself in combat to earn their respect. Instead of demanding respect, he earns it by overcoming challenges. By the end of his arc, he isn't just a Krogan by name. He's a warrior who has proven himself. This difference is huge. Players don't just watch Grunt develop. They actively help shape his journey, making it feel satisfying and well-earned. Meanwhile, Tosh is already supported from the start, making her self-imposed struggle feel unnecessary and less engaging. 3. Integration into the world. Tosh's arc breaks immersion by injecting modern social politics into a fantasy setting. Role-playing games are about immersion, stepping into a fully realized world with its own lore, history, and cultural conflicts. Dragon Age has always explored themes of oppression, war, and power dynamics. These themes were woven naturally into the game's world building. Tosh's arc, however, feels completely disconnected from Thedas and instead mirrors modern-day social politics. The inclusion of preferred pronouns in dialogue doesn't fit a medieval fantasy world. No prior Dragon Age game has established that Thedas even has this concept, making it feel like a modern, real-world debate forced into the setting. Just as the existence of gender transition scars in a world with shapeshifters makes no sense, Thedas has magic, spirits, and literal beings that can change their form. Introducing modern medical transition surgeries contradicts the established lore. Her gender identity struggle isn't tied to any major world events, power structures, or historical conflicts. Unlike elves, mages, or Qunari who all face systemic discrimination, Tosh's arc doesn't expand the world in any meaningful way. It only reflects a real-world discourse. If her struggle had been tied into Dragon Age's existing societal tensions, such as the rigid structure of the Qunari or class struggles, it could have felt more natural. Instead, it stands out as an awkward insertion of modern identity politics into a setting that was never built to support it. In contrast, Grunt's arc enhances Mass Effect's world building. His story is fully integrated into the established world of Mass Effect. His arc gives players first-hand insight into Krogan traditions, values, and expectations. The game doesn't just tell you about the culture, it makes you experience it through gameplay. The Rite of Passage mission expands their lore. Instead of feeling like an isolated personal struggle, Grunt's arc helps players understand the Krogan's warrior culture and their internal conflicts. His story feels essential to the setting, reinforcing the themes of war, survival, and proving one's worth. His journey isn't just about him. It reflects the struggle of the Krogan people as a whole. Rather than feeling like an out-of-place attempt to inject modern values into a fictional world, Grunt's arc deepens the game's universe, making his story feel immersive, compelling, and thematically relevant. The issue of modern social politics breaking immersion isn't just a problem in Dragon Age, it's something I've personally dealt with in my own game development. In my game Nexus Defenders, a narrative-driven tower defense game, there are story segments between missions to develop the characters and world. While developing the game, one of the characters, Echo 313, was meant to be a comic relief AI assistant. Originally, he spoke using Gen Z slang to add humor, but playtesters hated it. The modern speech felt out of place in a sci-fi world set thousands of years in the future, breaking immersion for players. I took their feedback and I redesigned Echo 313 to have a more robotic, calculated personality similar to Jarvis from the MCU. This experience reinforced how important it is for characters to feel like they belong in a world they're written for. Just like how the Gen Z slang didn't fit into a futuristic sci-fi setting, modern identity politics feel out of place in a medieval fantasy world like Thedas. When characters speak and act in a way that don't match the established world, it doesn't matter how well written their arc is, it will always feel forced and immersion breaking. Point 4, character likability. Tosh is mean-spirited and hard to connect with. One of the biggest criticisms of Tosh is how unlikable she is. She's hostile towards Rook, the main character, and other companions even when they try to help her. She spends most of the game frustrated, dismissive, rude, and acting like an angsty teenager. Even when given chances to connect, she often pushes people away rather than forming meaningful relationships. A character can be edgy, angry, or bitter, and still be compelling, but there has to be something that makes players want to root for them. Tosh doesn't have that. Her struggles feel self-inflicted, and she never displays qualities that balance out her frustration, like moments of insight, humor, or personal growth. Instead of showing different sides of her personality that would make her frustration feel earned, she stays in a constant state of resentment, which makes her exhausting to interact with. Grunt, on the other hand, Grunt is a violent, combat-obsessed Krogan, but he's fun, charming, and easy to like. He has a childlike enthusiasm for battle, making his aggression entertaining rather than frustrating. He respects Shepard and the crew, forming genuine bonds that make him feel like part of the team. His personality is balanced. He's aggressive, but he's also loyal, funny, and endearing. Unlike Tosh, who pushes others away, Grunt draws players in. He isn't constantly bitter or caught up in personal grievances. He's driven by a clear goal and a desire to prove himself. His moments of growth are earned, and by the end of his arc, he's a character that players genuinely care about. Both Grunt and Tosh are outsiders and their struggles are tied to this. But Grunt's story is about proving himself through action. Tosh's is about demanding validation without growth. That key difference is why Grunt is beloved and Tosh is widely disliked. As a bonus, I want to share this quick clip that demonstrates how poorly this game is written. This type of conflict resolution is what you would find in a show for preschoolers.
Maybe you two can find different things to talk about around each other.
I'll try not to press on the subject of necromancy when we travel together, Tosh.
Okay, thanks. It's fine if I ask about it first.
In that vein, could we avoid any dragon trivia?
What? Who doesn't like dragons?
There's lots of other stuff to talk about. Tosh knows Ravane and the Qun. Emmerich knows Navarra and plants.
Plants. Plants are okay.
I have always been curious about the Lords of Fortune.
See? It's a start.
Let me know in the comments below of any characters who have an outsider arc that you like. I'm not going to mention this regularly, but I wrote a book 4 years ago on motivation, weight loss, and fitness. I decided I want to share this book on this channel. The link can be found below in the description, right alongside the links to both of my Steam games, Nexus Defenders, as well as Beware Tomorrow. If you made it this far, please give the video a like to help boost the algorithm. And if you didn't like what you heard, then give it a thumbs down. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. I appreciate you for getting this far. Thank you. Take care. I'll see you next time. Salam.